Hey everyone, I'm Rafi Salem from F1IT, and today we are going to be talking about starting and growing your dental practice in 2022. With me today, I've got Rob Malandruccolo. Rob, I can't pronounce your last name. This is
Okay.
You're going to say it correctly, though, right?
Yes, I will. I'll pronounce it
Uh,
well.
so Rob from Bank of America and William Kohl from F1IT. Gentlemen, please introduce yourselves. Will, you go first.
Hello, as Rafi had mentioned, I'm William Kohl from F1IT. I've always been driven by discovering how things work, and in particular, started my career in 2003 in an orthodontic practice by fixing their digital panorex in my own orthodontic consultation. Flash forward a little bit, F1IT is a dental-specific IT provider with over a decade in the industry. We build, maintain, and grow practices by managing their technology. And our goal is to build relationships to become more of a business partner, getting away from the technical side of things, but also adding our operational value there. We do this by providing the value in any way that we can, which is what we're kind of hoping to show here today.
Great. Rob, please introduce yourself.
So I'm Rob Malandruccolo, and I work for Bank of America Practice Solutions, which is the healthcare division of Bank of America. For the last 18 years, I've been in the dental marketplace, and the last 10 helping doctors start or grow their dental practices within the New York market. So like Will, I like to consider myself super passionate about what I do, and helping business owners or healthcare providers grow their practices through projects, investment in capital equipment, purchasing real estate, all the things that a doctor has available to themselves in the form of a financing option.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of any dental project, best practices for dentists as it relates to starting, building, and maintaining a dental office, financing, real estate, project management, construction, renovation, technology, marketing, and a whole bunch of other things. Let's kick it off with you, Rob. What is the first most important thing a dentist should consider before starting a new practice?
So that's a great question. Whenever a doctor is pursuing or even just considering a project in the future for their practice, whether it be their first or even a second or third, what they want to do is they want to get themselves pre-qualified. They want to make sure that their own personal financial advisor looks over their personal financial situation, and they want to make sure that that information, their personal financials, are vetted by a healthcare lender. And the reason why that's so important is for several reasons. One, that financial approval, will say, or pre-approval, will be used as leverage for a future space that they may be either purchasing or leasing. So it's really important. If there's a good space in the market, there's a good chance more than one party is looking at it. So by having your finances approved early on before you start looking at properties for that practice, it usually brings you to the front of the list when you're dealing with landlords. So that's one thing. Another reason pre-qualification is so important is when you're pre-qualified, you get a lot of additional information from that pre-qualification. For instance, knowing how much or how large of a project that you could get financed, and how the practice would be outfitted today and for future expansion based on what you could do with the financing option, as well as understanding overhead, right? So when you take on a space, whether you lease it or you're getting a mortgage, the banks will give you information of what is a good place for your monthly, we'll say, rent or mortgage. So when you're searching within the means of what you could handle today.
Great. Will, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think it's really important to do your research in all aspects. Of course, you don't know what you can do without having your finances in check. But in general, to lean on the experience of others. People have done this before, built practices, whether they be a contractor or even just having someone qualify your insurances or staffing. Lean on their expertise, and you'll be bound to be successful.
Great. So Rob, when should a dentist consider starting their own practice in their careers?
That's a good question. In my time in the dental industry, I haven't had one doctor actually said I did this too soon, but I have had doctors say I have done this a little bit later. I wish I took the steps earlier. Obviously, that decision, you have to be financially prepared to take it, and you have to understand there is, with any project or with any starting of a business, there's a lot of an emotional hurdle that you have to overcome as well, because there's uncertainty. And this goes back to what Will said before. You have to lean on some people that as resources and make sure that you have confidence in them and they have your best interests at heart. In terms of starting an office, a lot of times you're preparing yourself financially for that, that first step. What usually happens is a lot of doctors have student debt, and that's their biggest concern. They have this debt load that took on to be able to get in the position or the profession, to move forward in that profession. And that's the concern. Like, they are thinking, I have to borrow more money to get this started. And what happens is, if a doctor gets into practice ownership sooner rather than later, their income grows significantly over their, especially their first 4 years, where they're able to pay down things like student debt. And usually their income level growing at such a high level will allow them to pursue other things personally and professionally. But in terms of a timeline, usually we see a doctor will work a few years as a GP outside of residency and in New York, because you're required a residency in New York. And a specialist, some of them will start a year out of residency, even with the additional debt. So that's the standard average time that we see doctors pursue practice ownership. Usually at some point it clicks. They realize that they're growing someone else's business. And that's when they're like, I'd rather invest the time in myself and in growing my own business.
Be your own boss.
Your own boss, control your own destiny.
Will, anything to add from your perspective? When should a dentist consider?
I mean, I think Rob nailed it down. It's a lot of it is almost a personal hurdle. It has to be the right time for yourself. F1IT, we get calls from all points of the life cycle here in creating a new practice. They can be an associate in an existing practice, which is, I would say, more often than not. Why am I building this person's practice when I could be doing it myself? Potentially better. There's times when you might not agree with how things are being handled there, and you want a little more control, and not to mention the extra revenue there.
So we discussed the what and the when. So the question is, for the people that are, for the doctors that are considering it, where do you think the best location might be for a dentist to open a practice? Rob?
I always, when I speak to doctors and they're considering locations, I always say, like, figure out who you want to service, right? Who do you want to be your patient? And that ultimately determines where that practice can be, or the type of neighborhood. But the good thing is, because the industry is so strong, the dental industry is one of the best professions or industries you could be in. There is no wrong specific space, as long as you do your due diligence in terms of demographics, competition, the type of practice that you want to own. Those are things that will ultimately impact the success of the office. Like, understanding your demographics will play the biggest impact besides the location itself. But where is easily defined after you know what type of dentist you want, what type of practice you want to own.
So riffing off of that, how does a dentist choose between buying a practice and starting a new practice?
So a lot of doctors today like the idea of acquiring offices because of the instant cash flow, the instant income. And, you know, but what some of them are not aware of is when you finance an acquisition, it's a different financing product than if you start up. So the expectation is that when you buy a practice that is an acquisition, that income supports the debts, not only the debts of the current loan for that practice, but all personal and professional debts that the doctor has to manage. So the income of the office is the most important thing in that regards. It has to be able to support the opportunity. When it comes to a startup, the banks are aware that you start with 0 patients, or we call it negative patients because your family is going to look for free dental work most likely. So the practice loan after your practice is built out includes construction, equipment, working capital, money to support practice. The loan graduates. So the loan will start with low payments and graduate over a period of time as the practice grows. So you're not overwhelmed with financing. In terms of starting or acquiring, I mean, a lot of times when you acquire an office, you may have to inject money into that situation to improve it. And that could be in the form of technology. And maybe, Will, you want to comment on that? I'm sure you do quite a bit
I
of.
didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just saying, like, when you purchase a practice, sometimes there's the unforeseen stuff that, yeah, I'm buying a practice. We have this patient base. It's awesome. I'm gonna, hit the ground running here. But you also inherit whatever you're buying. So, you can inherit
For better or for worse.
for better or for worse. There's maybe outdated technology. Maybe they haven't gone paperless yet. You're stuck there with cabinets upon cabinets of paper charts. And of course, that actually just, it adds to the investment. Like, you have to spend more money into either the right technology or service to get you up to date. You could have years of records there that could be digital, but maybe with a practice management solution, a practice management software that doesn't quite fit your needs, your idea of growth. So maybe you'll have to spend for a migration or a merge or something into another software. It's a lot of things to consider between starting a new practice and acquiring a new practice.
So segueing directly into that, Will, what hardware, software, and technologies does one need in place to start seeing patients?
So this is a little easier done when you are starting from scratch, when you're building a new practice. Typically, you start with, a lot of people are more comfortable with Macs versus PCs, for example. We want to make that determination because, as we filter down into the new technology and what's out there, you want to make these decisions. For example, if you were to choose a Mac system, you were using Macs in your entire practice, it really limits what practice management solutions you can use. They only build certain practice management software for Macs, or you can go to a cloud-based system, which kind of moves us into what practice management software you're going to get. You can get something that is server-based. You have an in-house server. It's under your control. There's no subscription fee or anything into keeping it alive. It's in your office. But then again, with cloud, you have the accessibility, right? A lot of times you can access it from home or multiple practices. And there's a shift in liability too. They're there to maintain the integrity of that database and the backups and the updates and whatnot. Whereas if it's in-house, you would have to have somebody there monitoring and managing everything for you.
So Rob, we thank you, Will. Rob, we talked about technology. We talked about when, who, what, where, et cetera. What are the top reasons why a dentist would want to take out a loan in the first place?
Well, I think sometimes you fail to recognize what a practice means to a doctor, right? So it's not just the way they get their income. It's also a potential passive income in the future. They may bring in other doctors to do other things where they're earning on that production. It's also, when you own a practice, when you own a small business, you have the ability to write things through that. So it lowers your taxable income to the government. as well as it is your future retirement vehicle. Like whether you use it as a passive income or you sell it, that is going to be a big windfall when you're ready to transition out into retirement. So that's why there's such a, I would say there's such an importance for doctors to understand it's not just about how you earn your income, it's how you build wealth, right? A practice will, by owning a strong business, you have the ability to leverage that business as well, including if you own real estate or have a bank buy the real estate for you. So there's a lot of options with practice ownership.
So Rob, I grew up in suburbia, New York, Long Island, and my dentist was the dentist around the corner from me. And a section of his house was his dental. He had one chair and he was taking care of me. And then the next kid would come in, and that was pediatric dentist, obviously. But, you know, I think now, a few decades later, his office might be out of date. So how often should a dentist remodel their dental offices, both Rob and Will? How often?
I think that from what I see, it's hard for when you're actually working in a physical space. Sometimes it's hard to form good opinions or like understand when it needs to be, we'll say, renovated or get, reimaged. A lot of times it's important to have, this is where family or friends are the best resource. Like you want their, we'll say, brutal honesty of when they walk through the office, right? Because oftentimes when we're in the same environment, we just get comfortable with it. But doctors should constantly be investing in technology, and I'll let Will touch on that. But in terms of the aesthetics of the office, if you don't invest in that, or at least consider changes, I would say at least every 3 to 4 years, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because if you're not investing in your space, a potential patient or a future referral may be lured by the brand new shiny office down the road. But in regards to technology, it moves pretty quick. And I'll let Will comment on this. I feel like personally what I've seen is, year end, if you're an established doctor, you should be looking at what's available to help your practice out.
Well, I think generally speaking, even outside of technology, you would know that it's time to remodel or reinvest rather when you see the experience itself change. You'll see it in your staff, and worse yet, see it in your patient's experience. Like you said, being lured by the brand new practice down the block, you'll see, your patients, they'll have loyalty, but do you have that, instant experience, booking online and, checking out really easily, being able to enjoy yourself while you're at the office? And the same way with your staff, do they dread coming to work because they have this many phone calls to make when it could have been automated in some way or another? Those are reinvestments, and I think that the remodeling or reinvesting into your practice should, those are the telltale signs, is what I see.
Last question for both of you. Just what one takeaway if a dentist is considering starting a new practice in 2022, what's your one takeaway, Rob and Will?
So I know for me, I would suggest, I would suggest while you may or may not need a business plan, like, because some banks don't require business plans, right? You would still want to have an idea of your plan or, the type of office you want, and you want to have that written down, right? Because it's important to be able to get to a certain place, you need to have a path. And by creating a business plan, that will actually start that path. And that's something that you'll be constantly adding to through the progress of, when you get to, we'll say the next step, whether it may be applying or not, but just by knowing what you would want in an office, and maybe even knowing what offices you've worked in, what you don't want, that will help, create an idea for you to be able to kind of move on or to react on moving forward.
I think that's, the reaction portion of it is really important. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that, we had a little bit more time to identify those inefficiencies and the things we'd want to change. And I think as we come back to our sense of normal, 2022, namely, I think it's a great time to get back on track, to reinvest or to build your new practice. It's a great time, if you ask me.
Great. Well, I wanted to thank you both for being on the show today. Next month, we're going to cover a few of these topics, but a little more in depth. And we have that scheduled for Tuesday, January 11th. So everyone watching this, mark your calendars for Tuesday, January 11th. Rob Malandruccolo. Did I get it right this time?
So much better. You're getting there. We're getting there.
We're getting there. William Kohl, easy last name. Thank you, gentlemen, so much, and have a great holiday season.
Thanks, Rafi. Appreciate being here.